It's time to start getting the seats in order. And I've spent the better part of a Sunday figuring this out. And I think I might be on my way to doing it. Using the plans from Gilpatrick, I've started to lay out the seats, and he's got some pretty demanding measurements. The width of the seat back here is 12 5/8, and at this end it's 17 3/8. Easy enough. And then there's a 12-degree angle here. Again, easy enough. Trying to figure out how to do it with my table saw. I made a mistake, and as soon as I did it, I realized the mistake that I had made, and spent a couple of days thinking about how do I fix this. And while I continued to work on the Canoe, and this is what I came up with. I still have to trim this tenon here so that it'll fit into the mortise that I will cut into this piece and this piece. But that's the general layout. And I'm just going to go ahead and machine the rest of my side pieces now. And 2 seats. Then I'll have to figure out how to make the mortise. I can't remember how thick we made the tenon. Let me see if I can measure that. Well, that said 21/64, so it's I need to trim it down to 5/16, and it'll take a little bit of chisel work to get this down. It's always easier to take wood off than it is to add wood, so I'll trim that later. Waiting for my resin hardener to come in. I'm going to put this together with epoxy resin instead of glue, and then I'll coat the whole thing in epoxy resin, and then I will coat that with a varnish. And once that's done, Lisa is going to do the caning. But the first step is to get the seats put together. And I'm doing it now because the time for the seats is still easily a month away, but it takes time to let the epoxy resin and the varnish dry. So I'm trying to get the bright work, and some of this, the trim is sometimes referred to as the bright work, trying to get that done ahead of time so that when I'm ready for it, I can just do it and I'm not waiting. So let me continue to work on this. I've cut the tenons, and you can see right here, this is 12 degrees offset from this side. And then this piece right here is 90 degrees to this face. And this face is 12 degrees from this face. So this and this are parallel, and the 12 degrees is established in Gilpatrick's plans. The next thing I need to do is cut the mortise. So I'm using a 1/4 inch router bit, and the depth of the tenon is 5/16. So the easiest way to do that is to first make a pass with the router and then flip the boards around and make another pass. And you can see here's my layout line right here. So that's what I'm going to do now, is make that pass. And that's what the tenon looks like. Now this isn't going to fit. And it's not going to fit because this is rounded and that is not. So there's two ways to handle this. One, I can take a rasp or sandpaper or even a chisel and round these over. Or I can take a chisel to this. And that's actually what my preferred method. I don't know if you saw it or not, take a chisel to this. And like I said, that's my preferred method. I've done it on a practice piece. There. And now this will fit like that. Now you see there's a small gap there, and that's not ideal. I wish it weren't there. So I'm going to have to fill that gap somehow. And the way I'm going to fill that gap is when I put this together with epoxy resin, the first thing I'll do is I will wet all the surfaces with epoxy resin, and then I'll add a filler with a little bit of the sawdust from the cherry that I'm using. A little bit of the cherry sawdust. And that will add color to it, and that'll fill that hole in, that little gap in nicely. Gonna do the initial fitting now. And it's just a rough guess of what it's gonna look like. I still have to work some of these joints. And that's it. That's the rough fit. Make two of them. It's oversized lengthwise from here to here, but that's a big seat. But that's it. That's what Gil Gilpatrick recommends. So we'll go with that. I'll round over these edges with a round over bit all the way around, and I have to drill holes all the way around for the caning, but I won't do that until it's glued up. First sanding is complete. It's a rough sanding, but both sides and the top have been sanded smooth. Going back over it again, fairing it now. Also, you can see that I've removed the support structure. The Canoe now rests solely on the forms, just loose in there. Rounded the bow and the stern over, haven't decided which is which. Now what I need to figure out is, you can probably see I've got some gaps, and what I don't know is how many of them I have to fill before I glass this. Do I have to fill all of them or only the large ones? I have to do some research on that. But the Canoe is taking shape. A lot of sanding. Spent all day today, Saturday, sanding this. And I had pre-sanded parts of it. I plan on doing a video of lessons learned. And one of the lessons I've learned is when I'm machining the cedar, I should take each plank and keep it separate. And when I machine strips out of that plank, keep all of those strips together from that individual plank. And the reason as you can see, I have varying color, dark, light. This is white cedar, and then darker, a light color, darker, lighter, and so on and so forth. And then as we get up to the top, or what is the bottom of the canoe, I filled the whole center with white cedar. And what I would have preferred is one of these two strips forming 4 strips or 5 strips over here of dark before I went to the white. And if I had kept all of the planks separate as I was cutting them and machining them, I would have known that this is dark, this is light, so on and so forth. But when the strips are sitting in the garage, it's hard to sometimes figure out which are dark and which are light. So that's one of the lessons I've learned. It's just an aesthetic, but something to keep in mind for the future. August 28th, I glued the frames up using epoxy resin with some thickening agent, and this is the end result. Now I need to spend some time marking out my pattern for where I want to drill my holes. And when I built this, I realized, wow, that's a big seat. And I went back and reread Gil Gilpatrick's book, and it's really a good book. I suggest you use this one or one similar to it. And I reread what he said about the seats, and he said he likes ample seats, and you'll have to read his book to get the joke, I guess. But once the frame is made, then the next thing to do is to mark in from the inside 3/8 of an inch, a line 3/8 of an inch, and that line is 3/8 of an inch, and you're going to do that all the way around, just all the way around. Then what you're going to do is find the center point from this corner and mark it, and then mark out 3/4 of an inch, and that's the pattern. Now as you get down to the end, depending on how you made this may not be 3/4 of an inch, so you may need to add or subtract a little bit on the last few to kind of straighten it out. And down here you can see that that's obviously not 3/4 of an inch. And over here, these three I adjusted ever so slightly to get them to even out. Once that's done, you can use a hand drill, or since I have a drill press, I came over here and I made a real simple jig, put the jig on the drill press, and what this allows me to do is put my workpiece in, and I don't have to worry about moving it back and forth. That's going to be the same all the way down this line. Now all I have to worry about is this line. So let me see if I can get this on video. Do it like that, see what happens. And that's it. And I'll just go all the way across the top, all the way across the bottom. Haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do this, but we'll work on it, and I'll show you when I'm done. After marking everything out, I went ahead and drilled the holes around the perimeter, and now the next thing is to round over the edges. I did a slight round over on the inside, and I'm going to do a slightly larger round over on the outside. round over bit. I've raised it slightly from where I had it to do the inside of the frame. So I've already cut a test piece, and we'll just proceed from here. Now there's more than just an aesthetic to this. I needed to round over just a little bit so that the finish will stick to it. If you have a hard edge, like here, a hard 90, this part right here, the 90, finish won't stick to it. And it becomes a weak point where the finish can fail and start failing back in this direction or the other way. I'll take care of this later because I have to cut this down. But that's the first frame, just about ready for finish. I have to sand to 150, and then I'm going to epoxy it. Spend a lot of time trying to get epoxy down into the holes so that they don't rot. Put a coat of epoxy resin on the seats. Did that about 2 hours ago, maybe a little longer. It's just sitting here curing, and I'm just going to leave that alone. If I need to put more on, I will, but not tonight. I'm just going to, if I need to put more on, I'll have to sand it with 80 grit sandpaper and then reapply. And then I've been spending time sanding the hull, and I've been sanding it with 100 grit sandpaper. And now I'm coming up on the point where I'm going to start fiberglassing soon. So one of the things, I still need to sand more, but I'm going to sand with 120 grit sandpaper, and the 120 grit sandpaper will be the final sanding. But before I do that, I want to raise the grain. With all the sanding that I've done, the wood pores are pretty well closed up, and I want to open them up a little bit for that final sanding. So to do that, all I'm going to do is wipe the hull down with the damp cloth. And this is what it should look like after I fiberglass it. That's going to be nice. Not really trying to soak it, just trying to dampen it. And let it dry really well, and then come back. It'll be tomorrow, and do the final sanding at 120. Then after that, I'm going to have to put the first coat of epoxy resin on, and I'll do that with some silica beads to help fill in some of the gaps that still, for whatever reason, are not filling in. Lots and lots of sawdust. I really like the darker colors. I didn't even think about that when I was picking out the cedar. It's a lesson learned. Didn't even think about the richness of the colors when I was picking it out. I was just picking out cedar. Shame you can't smell the cedar. I guess like everyone who builds a canoe for the first time, I've got a lot of trepidation about the fiberglass. It's one way to really mess up all the work is to not do that right. And I don't know enough about it to know all the possible mistakes. But there, that's the hole wetted down. Take a tour of it before it dries too much. So that's about what it's going to look like when I fiberglass it. Look at the top. The darker is Eastern red cedar. This is Western white cedar. And that's it. That's what she looks like today, August 29th.